Picture this, you've been having lower back pain for about 6 weeks. Your GP refers you for an MRI. You go in, lie still for 40 minutes, and a few days later your doctor calls you and says, "We found a disc bulge at L4 to L5. There's also some degeneration at a couple of levels, and the radiologist has noted some mild arthritis in the facet joints." And just like that, everything changes. You cancel your gym session, you start walking differently. You stop bending over to pick things up off the floor. You Google disc bulge symptoms at 2 in the morning. You're now a person with a spine problem, a damaged spine, a spine that needs to be protected. But here is the question no one asked you. What if that MRI result has nothing to do with why you're in pain? What if I told you that right now, sitting in a room somewhere completely pain-free, there is a person with the exact same MRI as you? Same disc bulge, same degeneration, same arthritis, and they feel nothing, not a twinge, not a thing. And if you scan most people in this room without any back pain at all, the majority of them would have findings that look just as alarming on paper. Today's episode is about one of the most consequential myths in modern healthcare. It's about what your MRI can tell you, and more importantly, what it cannot. Welcome to the Wellness Bridge. I'm Gary Chen, physiotherapist and founder of GC Integrative Physiotherapy and Wellness on the Gold Coast. Every episode, we bring you conversations and insights that sit right at the intersection of Western clinical science and Eastern wisdom traditions. Because the best healthcare, in my experience, lives in that space between the two. Today, no guest, just me, the science, and a topic I care deeply about. Because I have sat across from too many patients whose pain was made worse, not better, by a piece of paper with their MRI results on it. And I want to change that. Let me start with a landmark study. In 2015, a researcher named Brinjikji and a team at the Mayo Clinic published a systematic review in the American Journal of Neuroradiology. They looked at over 3,000 asymptomatic individuals, people with no back pain whatsoever, and they scanned their spines. Here's what they found. In people aged 20 years old, 20, completely young, 37% already had disc degeneration visible on MRI. 30% had a disc bulge. By the age of 50, those numbers had jumped to 80% and 64% respectively. And by 80 years of age, 96% had disc degeneration. 84% had disc bulges. 96%. That means if you scan a room full of 80-year-olds, your nana, your granddad, people who are completely fine, almost every single one of them has what would be called an abnormal spine on imaging. And yet most of them are not walking around in agony. Most of them are fine. So what are we actually looking at when we look at these MRI findings? In the majority of cases, we are looking at age-related change. We are looking at the natural process of a spine, doing what spines do, adapting to decades of gravity, movement, load, and life. Just like wrinkles on your face or gray in your hair, these changes are normal. They are not damage. They are not injury. They are not a life sentence. So why then do we build our entire treatment paradigm around them? This is where the biomedical model of pain starts to fall apart. For over a century, Western medicine operated on a very intuitive but ultimately flawed assumption that pain lives in tissue, that where there is damage there is pain, and where there is no damage there is no pain. Find the structural cause, fix the structural cause, eliminate the pain. Clean, simple, logical. Except chronic pain doesn't work that way. And the research now makes that abundantly clear. A 2023 review in Physical Therapy Reviews put it plainly. The biomedical model's narrow focus on structural causes is inadequate for chronic pain, which involves complex multifactorial issues far beyond tissue damage. Pain is not simply a signal from an injured structure. Pain is a protective output produced by the brain. So if pain isn't coming from the disc, where is it coming from? The answer lies in what neuroscientists call central sensitization. And in 2023, the International Association for the Study of Pain actually introduced a third official pain category, nociplastic pain, specifically to describe this. Alongside nociceptive pain, which is your standard tissue injury pain, and neuropathic pain, which comes from nerve damage, we now have nociplastic pain, pain arising from altered nociception without clear evidence of actual tissue damage or nerve injury. In plain language, the nervous system itself becomes wound up. The volume dial on your pain system gets turned up high and it stays there. Stimuli that would normally not be painful, light pressure, gentle movement, even just the anticipation of movement, start triggering pain responses. The alarm is going off, but there's no fire. And here's a really important thing for anyone listening who has been in chronic pain for a long time. This is not in your head. This is not you being weak. This is a measurable physiological process. Your nervous system has learned pain, and learning can go both ways. What was learned can be unlearned. Now, I want to be honest with you, because I think honesty builds trust, and I think healthcare doesn't always model that well. The research on central sensitization is powerful, but a critical review published in 2024 in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews makes an important point. While central sensitization describes a real neurological phenomenon, hyperexcitability of the nervous system, no study has yet conclusively proven that central sensitization causes chronic pain. The relationship is correlational, not definitively causal. Central sensitization is associated with chronic pain. It accompanies it. Whether it drives it or is driven by it, that's still being worked out. I tell you this not to undermine the concept. It's clinically extremely useful. But because I want you to be the kind of person who can hold nuanced information, not just MRI shows damage, therefore pain, and not just it's all in your nervous system either. The truth is more complex and more interesting than either extreme. What we do know very clearly from systematic reviews and meta-analyses is this: fear of movement, catastrophizing, and what's called kinesiophobia, the fear of physical activity because you believe it will cause harm, are among the strongest predictors of disability in people with back pain. Not the imaging findings, not the disc bulge, not the arthritis score, the fear. A 2020 systematic review in PLOS ONE showed that catastrophizing and fear avoidance beliefs were the dominant predictors of work absence duration and long-term disability in low back pain, more than any structural variable. And that MRI result, when it's handed to you without context, without explanation, without education about what it does and does not mean, plants the seed of that fear. It gives your brain a story that says your body is broken, and the brain believes that story, and it amplifies the pain accordingly. There's a teaching in early Buddhism, attributed to Siddhartha Gautama himself, called the parable of the two arrows. The teaching goes like this: if you are struck by an arrow, it hurts. That's unavoidable. That's life. But if, after being struck by the first arrow, you are struck by a second arrow, the arrow of your reaction to the pain, your thoughts about the pain, your fear about what the pain means, your suffering is much greater than the first arrow alone. The first arrow is the physical sensation, the nociceptive signal, the tissue information traveling up the spinal cord. That part you often can't control, especially in the immediate phase. The second arrow is everything else, the catastrophizing, the what if this never gets better, the avoidance, the identity shift. I am now a person with a bad back, the sleepless Googling. That is the second arrow. And in chronic pain, the second arrow often causes more suffering than the first. Here's what modern neuroscience says about this. A 2021 study published in the journal Mindfulness mapped the Buddhist two arrows framework onto neuroimaging data. What they found was striking. The first arrow, the raw nociceptive experience, activates the amygdala and the somatosensory cortex. The second arrow, the appraisal, the fear, the suffering layer, activates the prefrontal cortex and circuits associated with self-referential thinking and self-blame. This is central sensitization made personal. When the second arrow fires repeatedly, when we catastrophize, when we fear movement, when our identity becomes wrapped up in being in pain, we are repeatedly activating and strengthening the neural circuits that amplify pain. We are essentially training our nervous system to stay in threat mode. Pain neuroscience education, PNE, is at its core an intervention that targets the second arrow. A 2025 systematic review and meta-analysis confirmed it significantly reduces pain, disability, fear of movement, and catastrophizing in people with chronic low back pain. It works not by fixing the disc, not by reversing the degeneration, but by changing what the brain believes about the threat, and in doing so, it turns down the volume on the alarm. The Tao Te Ching has a line that I keep coming back to in clinical work. Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing yourself is enlightenment. When it comes to chronic pain, knowing that your nervous system has learned a pattern and that you have the capacity to unlearn it, that is a profound shift. That is the beginning of recovery. So, what does this mean for you practically? Let me give you 3 concrete things. First, when you get an imaging result, ask your clinician one specific question. Is this finding consistent with my age and normal wear and tear, or is there something here that requires structural intervention? That one question forces a different conversation. It opens the door to the honest answer, which is, in the vast majority of cases, that what you're seeing is normal aging, not catastrophic damage. Second, start to notice the second arrow in your own experience. When you feel pain, is there a layer of fear, catastrophizing, or avoidance that fires straight after? You don't have to suppress it, just notice it, name it. That's the second arrow. And gently, very gently, begin to question the story it's telling you. Is this movement actually dangerous, or has my nervous system learned to predict danger here based on past experience? Third, move. I know that sounds simple and possibly even offensive if you're in a lot of pain right now, but the research on graded exposure, the systematic, gradual, supported reintroduction of movement is unambiguous. Gentle, purposeful movement is one of the most powerful signals you can send to an oversensitized nervous system that says we're safe here, we can turn the alarm down. Pull-based movement, walking, tai chi, gentle physiotherapy guided exercise, these are not just physical rehabilitation. They are neurological re-education. And I want to add one more, a fourth, because I think it's important. Get the right support around your pain, not someone who looks only at the structure and tells you what's wrong with your body. find a clinician who understands the biopsychosocial model, who can hold the biology and the psychology and the social context of your experience all at once. That's integrative healthcare, and that is what actually moves the dial. We started today with a scenario. You in a doctor's office holding a piece of paper with your MRI results on it, feeling like you just received a verdict on your body. I want to leave you with a different image. I want you to imagine that same piece of paper, but now you understand what it's actually telling you. You see the disc bulge and you think, yes, that's my 45-year-old spine doing what 45-year-old spines do. You see the degeneration and you think, the question isn't what's changed on the scan. The question is what's happening in my nervous system and what can I do to help it settle. That shifting understanding from body as broken machine to nervous system as adaptable learner is not just a medical reframe. It is an act of self-compassion. It is removing the second arrow. If today's episode gave you something, a new question to ask, a new way of seeing your pain, please share it with someone who needs it. Someone sitting in a waiting room right now, holding a scan result, feeling afraid. This knowledge is too important to keep to yourself. I'm Gary Chen. This is the Wellness Bridge. Together we find balance in one.